Boys communicate, process emotions, and navigate the world differently. But how can we support them in becoming emotionally healthy men? Today, you get practical strategies for connecting with boys, along with ways to build language and foster open communication, and guide them towards emotional growth. We'll also talk about why windshield time works and why movement-based conversations work. In addition, today's guest will explain common misconceptions and why middle schoolers need more guidance, not less. So if you are the mom of a boy, this episode is definitely a must listen. Does your child have a speech-language delay and you really want them to talk? Do difficult behaviors derail home life and you know the frustration is a communication struggle? Does your child see a speech therapist and you wonder, what do they do and how can I help? If these or similar questions are in your mind, this podcast is for you. Hello, my name is Dinalynn Rosenbusch. I am a speech-language pathologist that has worked with children from birth to 21 for 3 decades. And in my classrooms, I see you wanting to connect with the heart of your child, but their speech and language skills create a barrier. So if you have a kiddo that has difficult behaviors, needs to expand their language or learn to say speech sounds, and maybe even receives speech therapy, stay tuned, because in this podcast, you will learn how to use your daily life as a tool to communication practice and how to do that practice. You will become confident knowing you are making the difference you want to make. And you will hear success stories of parents who have navigated these struggles already. We'll do this all while focusing on building deep, meaningful connection and confidence in your kiddo. So grab a cup of coffee along with a notebook and pen. It's time to speak in the way your child's brain understands. And that is the language of play. May is Better Speech, Language, and Hearing Month, which provides us an opportunity to raise awareness about communication disorders. Now, with that in mind, we have been bringing on a guest each week that will talk about something related to speech-language development and or disorders every single week in this month. Today, we have an episode about boys. Speech and language disorders does occur more often in boys than it does in girls. And sometimes I think that if we understood how boys typically develop language, how they develop speech, and it is a little different than girls, and moms, we think through our own lenses, and it's difficult to think about what it must be like to be a little boy because we were never a little boy. So this episode is to call attention to some of the things that we can do differently to help our little boys by knowing how to teach them and reach them in the way that they develop best. So this week's honoring of Speech, Language, and Hearing Month is focused on understanding, leading, and teaching boys for moms. And before we begin, I want to read a beautiful 5-star review from Mimi Greg in the United States. This person writes, "As an educator and parent, I can't recommend the language of play highly enough. Dinalynn brings such clarity, warmth, and practical wisdom to every episode. Her background as a speech-language pathologist is evident, but it's her ability to make complex topics feel accessible and empowering that really stands out. Whether you're navigating concerns about your child's language development or simply looking for everyday strategies to support communication, this podcast delivers real help with heart. Thank you, Dinalynn, for the work you do." Aw, that just warms my heart. Thank you so much, Mimi Greg. And if you listeners have not yet left your review, please go to lovethepodcast.com/play. We now have this available to you because sometimes in the apps that you listen on, it is difficult to find the place to review. So go to lovethepodcast.com/play. It is now just as easy to follow and subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. And that is followthepodcast.com/play. And remember, parents, even though speech language pathology is a highly specialized field, you can learn to implement step by step what we know as speech pathologists. You don't need to learn everything that there is in the field. You only need to know what is pertinent to your child. Having said that, if you have a child that you are working with or living with and you have questions and you'd like to know, how do I work with them? Book a discovery call. You will see that in the show notes below. And we'll have a conversation to see if working together might be a good fit for your needs. All right, now let's start this pre-recorded episode with Dr. Richelle Whittaker. Enjoy. Hello, listeners. Today you have a treat. Dr. Richelle Whittaker is a speaker and educational psychologist, parent advisor, and host of the Raising Sons podcast. And she is a heart-centered leader, and she's passionate about helping families win. Her work equips and empowers parents and caregivers with tools to close learning gaps, find work harmony, and maintain mental wellness. She enjoys creating a space to help parents and caregivers explore tough topics that navigate solutions. And at its core, Dr. Whittaker's work is about advocacy, being a voice, and creating a space for families to thrive. I love that. Dr. Richelle, thank you for being here today. And I know today we're specifically going to focus on raising sons like your podcast has. And I have a daughter that has 2 sons. And she says to me, oh man, how do I relate? So I know that she is with a crowd of many that wonder, as moms, what do they think? What are they doing? So what got you into this kind of work?
Well, thank you for having me. But what got me into this work, interestingly enough, I am a mom of sons, but it was my cousin actually years ago. We are a few years apart, so I'm older and we grew up together. And so 2 things happened. One, he used to get in trouble all the time for just doing things, and he would get in trouble and then he'd go right back to doing it. And I would say, what are you doing? And so we went to school together. And so they called me into the office and say, can you talk to him? And I'm like, I'm not his mom, but I would. It didn't really change anything.
Right.
So my relationship with him, and then we got older, and his mom and his sisters, because he's the only boy in his immediate household, they moved away, and then they moved back to where we live in Texas. And his mom was transitioning, my aunt was transitioning, and so she wanted to do everything on her own. And so she went to a transitional living facility, but my cousin couldn't go because he was too old. So he was 16, and so he had to be separated. And for whatever reason, I got to be the chosen one to drop him off at this place for young teens. And so I was heartbroken. I wasn't in a position to do anything. But that really kind of started the catalyst for me wanting to do all I could, understand all I could for boys. And it's not until really a few years ago that I really made that connection, where this passion and heart came from. And then as it would providentially happen, I have sons of my own. So yeah, that's how all of that kind of came together.
Well, that's interesting background. And I imagine that it gives you a lot of compassion and open understanding about your own sons. What do you understand is different? I'm sure there's lots, but let's start. What's different about how boys process the information, especially like you just talked about, correction? They process it different. Can you explain the difference?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that I will say is that boys are not a monolith, meaning that they are not all the same. So I have 2 sons and they are very different. So one of my sons, I can have a conversation with, and he and I can talk. Now, when we talk, we're not talking like I'm not sitting across from him and we're having this long drawn out conversation. A lot of times we're in the car, and that makes the conversation ease. It's more difficult if we're just kind of sitting still. Now, my other son, we have to be moving. I have to be engaging in an activity with him. We're riding bikes or we're playing basketball to really get him to talk. He's not thinking so much when he's moving. So asking him questions and getting him to participate in the conversation is easier that way. And
Mhm.
so when we talk about communicating with boys, a lot of times, one, we have to figure out, according to our son or the boy that we're working with, how they communicate, what's their communication style. What I found generally is that a lot more boys tend to be like my younger son, and they need to be doing something when you're asking them hard or tough questions, or when you're just wanting them to open up. So
So, like an activity that uses the body but not the brain as much, so that
yes,
they save their brain for the conversation and their body's movement helps them to process. Is that what you're
yep,
saying?
absolutely.
You mentioned the other one likes, for example, to be in the car. And I've
Mhm.
heard that referred to as windshield time, and
Ah,
that you are looking forward so you don't have the stress of the eye to eye contact, the way
mhm.
girls often thrive. But boys, when they're looking outward, generally, of course, everything we say, like you said, is a generalization.
Yes.
We're making a stereotype here because there's a commonality, but it's not that every
Mhm.
child is like this. But when they look out the windshield, it takes away that stress. Would you say that that is the right way to interpret that?
I would, because my older son has said, it's hard for me to look people in the eye. So we've
Uh-huh.
had conversations about making direct eye contact. So I'm like, well, just look at them in the face where it looks like you're looking at them in the eye. So when we're in the car, it's easier for him, even though I'm his mom, to have these conversations and there not be eye to eye contact. So yes.
That's interesting. So then how do we like what are some other strategies that you would use with boys, particularly? The windshield, the movement, what other strategies nurture that ability to communicate?
So one of the things, because I've tried different things. So I've tried journaling with my sons.
Mm.
We started off doing that. So my son would, write down things that were bothering him, and then he would lay it on his pillow, and then I would go and pick it up, and I would respond. And so that worked for a while until he kind of stopped responding.
Sure.
so, but one of the things that I have found that works really well is if we're watching something. A show, a movie, something that they're interested in, and different things come up in the movie or the show. And I'll stop and ask them, hey, have you seen this? Or what do you think about this? And that gets them engaged. They're already engaged, but that gets them talking. And so I found that to be an effective way to communicate with them. It's something that they're already doing. Because now they're kind of like on autopilot, and they'll pause and then say, okay, what's our takeaway? Because that's usually what I say. So I
They know
found that
it.
to be useful. Yes.
Oh, that's good. Now, communication, good communication, is definitely tied to our emotional resilience, our emotional wholeness. And when boys aren't communicating well, um, that makes that emotional side trickier. And we live in a culture where the emotional side is often considered feminine, less
Mhm.
manly. So there's this cultural push, or I don't know what you call it, to hide emotions when you are male.
Mhm.
How do you raise an emotionally whole and healthy boy?
I think so there's not just one thing. I think there
Right.
are several things. And it really begins and ends with your relationship with them.
Mm.
So creating an open relationship, a relationship where they can come to you, so you're not having judgment. And so one of the ways that I've seen this happen is a son is coming to his mom and he's excited, and maybe she's got something that she's doing, and so she doesn't have time to talk. So she shuts him down, not intentionally, but what happens is he's interpreting as that she's not interested in hearing what I have to say. Just kind of just in the throes of parenting and moving and things like that. And
Normal
so
life.
one normal life, right? And
Yeah.
so instead of him coming to her, then he withdraws, and so he keeps his emotions and his feelings inside. And so one of the things that I tell parents to do, like and this is what I do with my sons, because my younger son, he always has something to share and something to say. And so one of the things that I do is I say, I'm interested in hearing what you have to say, but can we
Mhm.
wait till we get in the car, because we're rushing, we need to get in the car, we need to go to school or whatever. I want to hear what you have to say, but I just need us to get out of the house and then we can talk about it. And so that lets him know that I'm interested. I want to hear what he has to say, but I need to, we need to wait until we are in a space where we can talk about it. And so I think that is huge for a lot of moms, because we do it without thinking about that there's a consequence to us not listening at the time, or them dismissing what we are dismissing what they have to say.
Yeah, and it's easy to do, like you say, in the normal life, in the speed of life. And we think, oh, they get it because they see we're trying to get out the door.
Right.
But they don't. Their brains, and this is girls and boys, really, for it's children. They don't think like we think. So when we're thinking we've only got so much time to get out the door, get your shoes on, and they see the dinosaur that they want to talk about that's laying on the floor, they don't have that concept of time. They don't have the concept of what's going on.
Right.
So when we dismiss any of them, just like you said, that it's much better to let them know the
Yes.
where and the why. And yeah, that is so good. That is good parenting advice for every parent. Thank you. So what role do you believe communication plays in supporting emotional growth? Like you're talking about the relationship. So let's talk about their growth over time in that relationship, so that we can think about where we're taking them.
Yes. So I always say we have to start with the end in mind. And so I think it's important that we are laying that foundation, right? So I talked about listening, making sure that they know that they're being heard, and in that relationship, continuing to build on that. Because what happens as boys get older, things start to change, right? They may not want to spend as much time with you. I had a colleague of mine tell me that when she made a hard and fast rule. She's like, when your son turns 8, they're not going to want to hang out with you. They're going to want to hang out with dad, or they're going to want to start to hang out with the male in the house. And I was like, okay, well, we're going to see. And that was very true of my younger son, not so much of my older son. And so giving space to that. And I know that some moms are asking for mentors, because they start to see that with their sons around the age of 8, they're wanting that male mentorship. Mom, I want to talk to somebody that understands how I'm feeling, or what I'm thinking, or the things that I'm going through. And so I think from a like a broad scope, having other people too that your sons can talk to, whether it be whether it be a therapist, whether it be an aunt, whether it be an uncle, someone in the community. But as they grow, having someone to that gives them space to that they can talk to outside of you. I said you, but outside of mom. I think
Yeah,
that helps with communication growth too.
that makes total sense, that they would want to seek that, and they would want to see how communication happens among men, because their focal point is, I'm growing into a man. What is a man?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so picking those
Absolutely.
mentors would be fabulous. And I speak this from firsthand experience, a single mom, and I had one son, and then I had daughters, and my friends had daughters, and the neighborhood was girls. And
Wow.
nieces and nephews were later, but like my niece was also a girl. So as my son was young, he was the only boy most of the time.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it was really, really important to have men in his life that would talk to him, that would reach out to him, that would take him fishing, that would, bring them to their house to be able to play with their sons. And so like play dates for the boys was super important. And he did prefer, and it started around that age of 8 or 9, he did prefer to go to the other friends' houses for play about that time too. And I think it was because he wasn't just at home. He was experiencing having boys around him and dad around him in that other setting where he could learn a little bit more about being a man. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What, go
I've
ahead.
seen that consistently. No, I was going to say I've seen that consistently.
Yeah. It's beautiful advice and very important, and nothing against mom. Like when we are
No, no,
single
no,
moms,
no.
it's absolutely not against us. It is innate that if we were in their place, we would want women mentors too.
Right.
So, yeah. All right. I have one more question. As a speech path, I know that the majority of my students are typically boys. Boys take time to learn language that seems to be a little longer than girls, and they have more speech sounds in error for longer periods of time than girls. What do you see in raising sons, and what have you learned along the way?
So, in terms of speech, I think one of the things that's really important is talking to your sons and daughters early. So, even though they can't talk back, talking to them, having conversations with them, I think that's really key. Reading to them is really key in terms of helping them to develop language. A lot of times, what I've run into is that parents, when I say, "Oh, you should be talking to your sons," they're like, "But he can't talk back. He's not paying attention." It's important. That's how he develops language. And so I think that sometimes that's like missed by parents because I don't really know where it would come from. I'm in this field, so I understand it, but I don't know that. I don't know who else would tell parents that, right? Maybe the pediatrician, maybe not. And so I think that that's key in terms of developing language.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a two-part, there was another part to the question.
Well, there's speech, which is the sounds, and then there's language, which is let's develop words and the rhythm of speech and how you structure those words together to build sentences, the social part of language. And one of the things that I know too is that little ones, girls, tend to be more responsive. And just like you said, the boys don't necessarily react when you speak to them. So then parents tend to not speak as much to their boys because they don't become interactive early the same way that girls do that beckons more interaction. But it doesn't mean they're not listening.
Right. And so I think too with boys, you just have to, it's kind of even as they get older, you have to find ways to get the kind of response that you're looking for. And so maybe it looks like you're on the floor playing with them. It's more active in terms of trying to get a response. It's more in activity with them as opposed to just kind of that stationary kind of eye to eye kind of contact. One of the things that I experienced with my younger son is he was not talking as quickly as my older son had, and so I was concerned and worried. And the pediatrician, she said, are you requesting things from him? Are you requesting him to speak to you? And she was like, think about it. And so what I realized was that his older brother, he would point or gesture or make some kind of sound, and my older son would automatically give him whatever it was that he was pointing or gesturing, and I would do the same. And so she was telling us that's why he's not speaking. I don't think that it's that he can't. He just has no reason to. And so what I started doing was he would point and I would say the word, and then I would say, "What is this?" And then he would have to repeat what I said. And so it was that I was then having an expectation of him to repeat and not just giving him what he wanted. So I think in terms of boys, we sometimes you have to make them do the work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is that I find too, even with littles, that the boys, not all of them, of course, just like we've talked
Right.
about, but the ones that are pausing in their development a little bit that way, oftentimes they don't see the need. Life is working.
Right.
And as soon as it's working, it's like it's common that they lock into, oh, that's how it's done. And then they move their thinking onto something else because it's done. They figured it out. I scream, I get, okay, I don't have to do anything else to communicate. And then we move to one word. Okay, I got that now. And they stop because they're at one word. But you do need to, it seems with some boys more so than most girls, you need to prod them along the way, just like you explained very clearly. That's an important piece to let parents know about boys.
Awesome. So I hope that if moms are listening or even dads, and you're like, they're not talking as frequently or as much, or maybe even at all, maybe it's because your expectation of them is not for them to say anything back. And so begin to practice requesting them to speak back to you, or whatever they're pointing to, that you then name it and then have them name it. So
Yeah. What we call that is sabotage, where you intentionally somewhat play dumb, but it's really mindfully being aware that they need to say it, so you are mindfully playing dumb. Like, oh, tell me what that is. Oh, that isn't actually a word. Oh, this is what you want. Oh, let me help you say it. Here's how you say that word. Now say it. Okay, now you can have it.
Absolutely.
So
Making
you're
them work for it.
exactly. So even though you know when they say goo that they mean milk or
Mhm.
something that is totally off, not letting that be the bar. Because as soon as they reach the
Yes.
bar, they may or may not add more.
Right.
So tell me some of the misconceptions people have.
About boys just in general. So I think kind of going back to what I said initially is that all boys are the same. And they're not. They're very different. And so all boys don't like sports. All boys aren't super active. All boys aren't anything that you could fill in, they aren't all the same. So I think one of the misconceptions is that a lot of times people think that all boys aren't the same. I also think that people think they don't see boys as boys, they see them as men having male grown men characteristics. So if they experience men who didn't express emotions, then they think that boys don't express emotions or that maybe boys don't have emotions. And so I think those are some common misconceptions. Boys don't cry. That's a huge misconception. Boys don't need emotional support. So a lot of times when boys get to, I see around middle school, high school age, parents start to pull back thinking, oh, they're good, they can figure things out on their own, and actually that's when they need more guidance than they may have needed in the younger years.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. And as they get older, they do need more guidance. We think that their their guidance will be natural, like at the schools, but
Hmm.
it's not necessarily. The guidance you don't want to have for your kids is going to be their fellow
Right.
peers.
Yep.
Yes. All right. So, how do we teach balance teaching boys to express their emotions when their self regulation is a little bit different and their coping is a little bit different? What would you say to that?
So, what I tell my sons and what I've told the boys that I've worked with before is everybody has emotions, right? Everybody experiences them. But how you respond to them has to be different. So, for example, if you're angry, you can be angry. However, don't respond in that anger. So, that might mean that you're holding off your response. That might mean that you need to go, punch your pillow or scream, outside, or take a few minute breather. If you're at school, ask your teacher if you can, take a few minutes. So the idea is to get them to think before they react to whatever it is that they're feeling, and to let them know that it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling. But if you're feeling some kind of way, so example, a lot of times boys don't want to cry in front of other people. So if you're in a state and you're hurt, and you feeling like you need to get it out, don't keep it in. Ask, if you're at school, ask the teacher, hey, can I get 5 minutes to, I just need to go to the bathroom. Or maybe you need to go, there's a counselor at the school, maybe you need to go talk to her. If you're at your home, you have free reign to go into your room maybe and cry, but um, don't hold it in. Making sure that you get that out and that it's okay. So
Mhm.
just having, I think it's important to have conversations with boys about feelings and how to express them, and alternative ways to express them when they don't feel comfortable expressing them in um, huge settings.
Right, right. That's fantastic. Thank you for the work that you do with boys or moms and dads of boys. Is there a like unique learning styles that you would say that are stereotypical for boys?
So I would say, um, I don't know that it's stereotypical. I found this to be true, but I would say more the kinesthetic, the
Yeah,
tactile kind of learning.
yeah.
That's the stereotypical, but it's stereotypical, but it's also true. And I can just give an example. So my older son goes to an all boys school, and when he started there, one of his teachers was a male, and so one of the ways that he got the boys to respond to questions was he would throw the ball, and the students would have to catch the ball to be able to respond. And so my older son at the time was very cerebral. He wasn't really into sports and things like that. So I'm thinking, oh, he's not trying to catch the ball. And as he's talking to me about this class and the teacher, and so then I say, well, are you answering questions? He's like, yeah, I want the ball too. And I'm like, okay. So it's stereotypical, yes, but it also seems to ring true. So that
Yeah.
movement, that need to have something tactile, um, So I think two things can be true at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. And I think too that when you use something like a ball, it gives you a very visual representation of whose turn it is.
Hmm.
And so there's no confusion there.
Right.
So the social piece of whose turn is it, who gets to move where, and then boys will bump into each other and grab it and scream it, but then they can freeze and listen, and you get the shorter snippets, and then they can continue.
Yes.
So there's some real stereotypes there. And of course, we know that stereotypes are made for a reason. You know,
Hmm.
there's a lot of truth in stereotypes, even though a stereotype doesn't match anybody.
Right.
But yet there's truth that built it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So I get that. That's really good. Thank you so much again for coming on The Language of Play. Now, let me think of, imagine the mom or dad that is driving a car right now and they are listening to this episode. If you were to give them one piece of information that they can remember when they leave after the chaos of getting everybody out of the car and making dinner or whatever, what would be your final thought? You said so many powerful and important things. What would you like to leave with the listeners as the final thought today?
The final thought that I would want to leave with parents is give your son space and room to be his authentic self. And so, what that looks
Beautiful.
like for you is just being open, no judgment, creating that kind of space for him, that kind of environment so that he can be who he is.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. And I think that rings especially true for the single mom who, at least I'm speaking from personal experience, when you're wondering, what are you thinking? Why do you do it that way? And it doesn't make
Mhm.
sense. Allow them to be who they are.
Mhm.
It's important. It's for girls and boys.
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful final words.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Dr.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Hey parents, I hope you found this episode helpful. If so, would you please take 30 seconds and share it with a friend who also lives or works with children? I would really appreciate it if you would leave a quick review for the show on Apple Podcasts. I read every review and it lights me up to know that this show is making a difference. Then come join my Facebook community, where you'll meet other parents who are dedicated to helping their children grow too. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thank you for joining me. Now it's time to go. Let's pop our kiddos in the strollers and go look around outdoors and see what we have to talk about.